From Daemon Targaryen's gruesome introduction to Aemond kicking off the Dance of the Dragons by accident, these are the most shocking moments from House of the Dragon. We got a couple of shockers in the very first episode, starting with our introduction to Daemon Targaryen. In hindsight, Daemon was always meant to be one of the lead characters of the show, so it was bold of the writers to make his first scene a massacre of the criminals of King's Landing. We first heard about him in small council meetings, where the council complained to King Viserys about Daemon not taking his responsibilities as commander of the City Watch seriously. But the rogue prince sure shut those guys up on one fateful night as he marched into King's Landing and commanded the Gold Cloaks to butcher every criminal they stumbled upon. If you could boil down all of the 8 seasons of violence from Game of Thrones into a single scene, this'd be the way to do it, and while the City Watch took out many criminals, they must have killed some innocents, too. This didn't bother Daemon, though, who simply had the mess loaded up into a cart and taken away. Now, the audience wasn't inclined to root for Daemon at this point, but the episode wasn't over yet, and there was another shocking moment on the way. The reason why Daemon was a key character even in the beginning is that the king, aka his brother, had a son on the way. And since Queen Aemma had been through tough pregnancies before, almost calling it quits after her latest one, Viserys really had his fingers crossed that this one would turn out to be a boy. Much to his luck, that's exactly what happened. But as Aemma went into labor, he was in breach. That's the gyno term for the baby's coming out the wrong way around. And in the medieval era of the show, the only way to save the baby was to perform a messy C-section that would kill Aemma. Viserys gave doctors the go-ahead, and Aemma died in a brutal C-section. And if that wasn't enough, his son died within minutes of being born, so there was no point in going through with a surgery like that. This whole turn of events really shocked fans, and they were ready to hate Viserys from that moment on because his obsession with having a son led to his wife's death, and folks weren't ready to be sympathetic to the embattled king, even though he could have used some support, because his small council didn't give him much time to grieve before pushing a crazy proposal on him. You can't really blame them for pressurizing Viserys to get back on his quest to make an heir, because as long as Viserys had no son, the next in line to the throne was Daemon, and that guy was expelled from King's Landing for celebrating the death of Viserys' son. Conveniently, a solution presented itself, as longtime ally Corlys Velaryon was looking to wed his preteen daughter Laena. In a scene that made fans hate Viserys even more, the king actually considered the proposal, taking Laena for a walk in the gardens to get to know her. Keep in mind that, in this scene, Viserys must have been in his late 40s and he looked older than his age. This sort of marriage definitely happens in Westeros, but for a main character, even a fan base that'll stomach brother-sister incest wouldn't tolerate this. Luckily, Laena shocked Viserys out of his madness by telling him that he wouldn't have to bed her until she was 14, and Viserys told Corlys to wake up and get a reality check. Good thing Viserys made a smarter choice about his next wife, right? Wrong. While all this was going on, Hand of the King Otto Hightower put his own scheme into motion, tasking his own teenage daughter, Alicent, with seducing the king. Every scene of this storyline was shocking in its own way, because Alicent managed to find a way inside the grieving old man's heart. And as distasteful as she found it to seduce someone twice her age, who's also the father of her best friend, she made it work. The hammer fell in the small council meeting near the end of the episode, where King Viserys announced that he was going to marry Alicent. The only person in the room who was happy about this was Otto, and the rest of the council members saw this snub to House Velaryon as something dangerous. At least marrying Laena would have been a good political move, but marrying Alicent was both politically and morally messed up. This was the second episode of the show, and it was already harder than ever to root for Viserys' success. Corlys thought so too, as he joined Daemon's ill-advised war in the Stepstones. Viserys wasn't the only one having marriage problems. Rhaenyra also had some complicated feelings for her uncle, and ever since Daemon had returned to Westeros, you could tell that his niece had a crush on him. Teenagers, am I right? What made this storyline messed up is that Daemon didn't try to bring her to her senses, and he was actually engaging in a bit of a romance with the girl. Was it because he wanted to get back at Viserys? Did he actually care for Rhaenyra that way? It'd be a while before we'd get to know for sure, but in the 4th episode, Daemon got Rhaenyra into a really compromising situation. Wearing some cool criminal hoods, the two of them went on a late-night adventure through King's Landing, where Daemon wanted to show the next queen of Westeros a side of the country she'd never seen. The adventure led them to a brothel, where the two were about to get into some Targaryen-style uncle-niece action before Daemon got cold feet, leaving Rhaenyra in the cold. Now, from a political standpoint, Rhaenyra was already in big trouble, and she made it even worse by trying to seduce Criston Cole, the Kingsguard Knight and Insel King of Westeros. Her actions in this scene didn't just put her in danger, it also ruined her friendship with Alicent and ruined Viserys' relationship with Daemon, and turned a huge chunk of the fan base against her. But the tensions between the adults affected not just them, but their children too. Yeah, it's about time we talked about the scene where Alicent's youngest lost his eye. Viserys' house could only be peaceful if everyone was far away from each other. But unfortunately, the death of Daemon's wife, Lena Valerian, brought the whole gang together for her funeral. Many of the ticking time bombs of the story exploded at this point, and the biggest one was Aemon Targaryen stealing Lena's dragon. This led to a fight between Alicent and Rhaenyra's children, the latter of which were sticking up for Baela Valerian's right to her mom's dragon. Things got messy, and just before Aemon could beat Lucerys to death with a rock, his eye got slashed. When the adults got involved, they failed pretty badly at resolving the problem. Rhaenyra stood up for her children, which led Alicent to try and stab her, and the good King Viserys gave everyone a stern talking to before limping out. You know, wars are complicated things, especially in this universe. But what was so shocking about this scene was that we basically got on the road to the Dance of the Dragons right here and everybody knew it. Well, everybody except Viserys anyway. I'm gonna end today's video with the most shocking moment that ended the season, and that was the death of Lucerys Targaryen. When Viserys passed away years after that fight in the caves, Rhaenyra and her family happened to be at Dragonstone. Otto and Alicent, who were known as the Greens by this point, took action to get Aegon onto the throne before the rightful heir Rhaenyra could find out what happened. This brought the Greens and Rhaenyra's side, the Blacks, to the brink of war. But the Blacks were determined to chill things out by having a chat. But first, they needed to get their friends in their corner, so Rhaenyra sent Luke to get House Baratheon on her side. Unfortunately, Aemond had beaten him to the punch, and he lured in the Baratheons with a tempting marriage proposal. As if it wasn't bad enough that Luke failed in his mission, he later had to get into a dragon fight with Aemond. Except Luke's dragon was a little young, while Aemond's was the biggest one in the entire world. It was no surprise that Luke and his dragon got chomped, but it was still a shocking moment even for Aemond, who just wanted Luke's eye. When Rhaenyra received word of this, a close-up of her face told us everything we need to know. It's time for war. This scene also cemented the battle lines in the fan base, as Black supporters now had all the ammo needed to spend the next 2 years fighting it out with the Greens on social media. So, from Aemond's dragon gobbling up Luke to Daemon's violent entry into the story, those were the most shocking moments from House of the Dragon.